Do you remember being a kid and just not feeling like a kid? Like you were watching your classmates play and you were somewhere else entirely, already thinking about the electric bill, or how to make your mom laugh so she'd stop crying, or what to say if anyone asked about your family. You were 8 years old and already carrying things most adults put down before they even pick them up. If that landed somewhere in your chest just now, this video is for you. Let's talk about something that doesn't get named very often. And because it doesn't get named, a lot of people carry it their entire lives without ever understanding why certain things feel the way they do. It's the experience of growing up in an environment where, at some point, childhood kind of ended early. Maybe there was divorce. Maybe there was financial stress your parents couldn't hide. Maybe someone was sick, or struggling with addiction, or just emotionally unavailable in a way that left you with a lot of space to fill, and you filled it. You got practical, you got quiet, you got useful. Here's the strange part. From the outside, these kids often look exceptional. Teachers call them mature for their age. They're responsible. They're the helper. They're the one everyone leans on. Adults in the room genuinely trust them. But inside, something very different is happening. And here's what makes this so quietly confusing. You weren't neglected in the obvious ways. You weren't unloved. For many people in this situation, their parents really were doing their best, and that makes it complicated to even admit that something was hard, because who are you to say it was, right? You might have thought other people had it worse. You might still think that. But here's what I want to offer today. Not as a diagnosis, not as blame, just as an honest look at what happens to the mind and the heart of a child who had to become a small adult before they were ready, and what that tends to look like decades later. Let me walk you through 4 ideas that help explain what's actually going on. I'll keep them human, not clinical. The first is parentification. It sounds exactly like what it is. It's when a child takes on a parental role, either practically or emotionally. Practical parentification looks like cooking for younger siblings, managing bills, translating for a parent who doesn't speak the language, being the one who wakes everyone up in the morning. Emotional parentification is quieter. It's being the person your mom calls when she's scared. It's sensing when your dad is in a dark place and adjusting your whole behavior to try to lift the atmosphere. It's absorbing the anxiety in a room so efficiently that you forget you weren't the one who created it. For many kids who experience this, it didn't feel like a burden at the time. It felt like love. It felt like being needed, and being needed felt like belonging. The second is hypervigilance, and I want to be careful with this word, because it doesn't always mean what people picture. Jumpy, fearful, on edge. Sometimes it looks almost elegant, and it's deeply exhausting. It means your nervous system became a very sophisticated early warning system. You learned to read a room before you even walked into it. You could hear the weight in a person's footsteps. You knew from the way someone stirred their coffee whether it was going to be a good day or not. You became fluent in other people's moods, and then you calibrated yourself around them. This is actually a skill. It makes people perceptive, empathetic, attuned. But here's the cost. It never turns off. Even in safe rooms, with safe people, there's still a part of you scanning, still listening for the thing that hasn't gone wrong yet. The third is suppressed needs. When a parent is struggling, the unspoken rule in the house often becomes, we don't add to the pile, so the child learns to be low maintenance. They stop asking, they stop showing their fear, their confusion, their loneliness. They present as fine, because fine keeps the peace. And the thing about suppressing needs for long enough is that eventually you stop knowing what your needs even are. You become fluent in everyone else's internal world and a stranger in your own. The fourth is something I'll call the inner child gap. When children are stretched beyond their developmental capacity for long periods, certain experiences that are normal and necessary for childhood simply don't happen. Carefree play, messiness without consequence, the freedom to be irrational, moody, dramatic, and a complete disaster, and have that be totally fine. Those experiences aren't just fun, they're developmental nutrition, and when they're skipped, there's often a part of the self that stays frozen there, waiting still for permission to just be young. Many adults who grew up too fast carry this, an outer life that looks composed and capable, and an inner life that quietly aches for something it can't quite name. Now let's get specific, because this is where it often becomes really recognizable. In relationships, People who grew up too fast often become the strong one, the stable one, the person everyone depends on. They give generously, they show up, but they can also find it genuinely difficult to receive. To let someone take care of them, to say, I need help, to be vulnerable without immediately scrambling to reassure everyone that they're fine. Some find themselves drawn to dynamics that feel almost familiar, relationships where they're needed more than they're nurtured, not because they want to suffer, because it feels like home, with rest and play. This one is subtle. A lot of people who grew up too fast feel genuinely uncomfortable doing nothing. Rest feels like laziness, play feels indulgent, fun has to be earned, or it needs to be productive somehow, or it feels vaguely wrong to enjoy something just because it's enjoyable. They might find themselves busy all the time, not just because life is busy, but because stillness lets something rise up that they've never quite known what to do with identity and self-worth. A common pattern for children who are parentified, or who consistently suppress their needs, is growing up without a solid sense of who they are outside of being useful. Their identity became their function, the helper, the problem solver, the one who holds it together. So as adults, there may be a low but persistent anxiety around the question, who am I if I'm not needed? Their worth is often tied, at least partly, to their output, to doing, to providing, to being indispensable. With setting limits, saying no can feel almost catastrophic, even when it's completely reasonable, because in the original home, saying no sometimes meant disappointing someone who was already struggling. It meant guilt, or conflict, or the fear of things falling apart. So the nervous system learned to avoid it. And even decades later, a simple no can trigger a disproportionate wave of guilt and the urgent need to over-explain. Being the responsible one is often celebrated, but no one tends to ask if the responsible one is okay. I want to take a moment, because I think this part matters just as much as the psychology. Everything we just described, every coping pattern, every way of showing up in relationships, every difficulty with rest, it made sense. It wasn't weakness. It wasn't dysfunction. It was a child doing the most intelligent, creative thing they could with the situation they were in. Your nervous system was not broken. It was building the exact tool it needed to survive the environment it was in. Hypervigilance worked. Suppressing needs kept the peace. Being capable made you feel safe. The only problem is that the tool doesn't always know when the environment has changed. You're not in that house anymore. You're an adult in a different life, with different people, and yet the old software is still running. The alarm system installed at age 9 is still pinging on a quiet Tuesday afternoon when everything is actually fine. That's not a flaw. That's not something to be ashamed of. That's just what happens when a nervous system forms in a high-demand environment. It adapts brilliantly, and then it needs time and compassion and some new information to slowly begin to update. You didn't choose to grow up fast, but you can choose, slowly, imperfectly, without pressure, what growing up well looks like now. None of this is prescriptive. None of it is a cure. It's just a starting place. Something small to try. 1. Name what happened without minimizing it. Not to blame anyone, just to acknowledge there was real difficulty, that it affected you, that you were a child navigating something large. You don't have to compare your story to anyone else's. Your experience counts on its own terms. 2. Practice noticing what you actually feel, not what's useful to feel, not how can I handle this, but what is happening inside me right now. This might feel awkward at first. Many people who grew up too fast were so focused outward that their interior life became almost inaccessible. Simple questions, asked gently and repeatedly, begin to open a door. 3. Let yourself receive something, even something small. When someone offers help, a ride, a meal, a kind word, try pausing before you deflect it. You don't have to immediately return the favor or explain that you're fine. You're allowed to just say, "Thank you, I appreciate that," and let it land. 4. Give yourself the experience of unproductive time, on purpose, not a wellness routine, not self-optimization, something genuinely pointless and enjoyable, a walk with no destination, a movie on a Tuesday afternoon, lying on the floor listening to music. The goal is specifically to practice existing without output, because for many people, that's something that was never allowed. 5. Rewrite the script around saying no. Start small. Decline one low-stakes thing this week without an elaborate excuse. Notice what happens in your body before you say it, and what happens after. Each small no rewrites the story that says protecting your limits is dangerous. Over time, evidence accumulates. The world doesn't end, people stay. 6. Find stories that mirror yours. Books, conversations, even videos like this one. There's something quietly powerful about hearing your experience reflected back, and realizing you're not alone in it. The isolation that often comes with these early experiences softens when it finds company. 7. Separate your worth from your usefulness. Practice by practice. This is long work, but it begins with a question you can ask yourself. Would I still deserve care, connection, and rest today if I hadn't done a single thing? The answer, always, is yes. Sitting with that question, even when the answer doesn't feel true yet, is how it slowly starts to become true. 8. Consider talking to someone trained to hold this with you, not because something is wrong with you, but because some things are genuinely easier to untangle with a witness. Someone whose role is to be present with your story without needing anything from you. If that's accessible, it can be a profound relief. A room where, for once, you don't have to be the strong one. Here's what I want to leave you with. The child who grew up too fast didn't do anything wrong. They loved deeply, maybe more wisely than most adults around them. They adapted with grace. They held things that were too heavy, and they held them carefully. That child deserved a longer childhood, more lightness, more time to not know things, more permission to just be small in the right kind of way. Held rather than holding, uncertain in a world that felt safe enough to be uncertain in. You may not have gotten that then, but you're here now. And something in you reached for this. Something in you still wants to understand, still wants to be seen, still wants to know there's a way through to something softer. That wanting, that is the part of you that never stopped being young, and it's worth listening to. You are not too much. You are not broken for being affected, and you are absolutely allowed, at any age, to finally, slowly, gently, without rushing, begin to grow up in peace. If this resonated with you, subscribe for more psychology deep dives. We go here often. And if this reminded you of someone you love, share it with them. Sometimes the most important thing is just knowing you're not carrying it alone.